Hi, Don. Great to have you here together to have the discussion about, MFA in the context of zero trust and, what are the challenges we have related to that? Before we start, a very short introduction of IC Consult. So IC Consult is a system integrator, a managed service provider focused on identity-related cybersecurity. And with a strong focus, we support our clients around the world with more than 850 employees. We are vendor independent, but of course we have partnership with strategic vendors, that have an exciting value proposition that help to solve the challenges our clients face today, like the Secret Double Octopus. And having said that, Don, do you want to share a little bit of information about Secret Double Octopus?
You betcha, you betcha. And Andre, thank you so much for including us in this webinar. I think this is a fascinating topic. Um, Zero trust, in itself is a confusing and topic, and a lot of focus around zero trust has really focused on the networking portion of it. A lot of times people think of zero trust more in the context of ZTNA or segmentation, but really the foundation of what it's all about is really is identity. Can you prove intent and who they are? And I think a lot of our discussion here is going to kind of surround the simple term. It's kind of like, can you beyond the shadow of doubt, right? It's sort of like the police shows, right? Can you prove it with beyond the shadow of doubt that the person that is accessing this important resource is who they say they are? And I think that's sort of the linkage, and that's where MFA comes in, or authentication, just as a general sense, is that's our tool for being able to assess whether this is truly the people that we've authorized to be able to access our resources. And that's what our Secret Double Octopus is about. And I know everybody that sees the name, they say, where did they get a crazy name like that? Which is it's always fun to tell the story around that, but I'll skip that for now. But anyway, so we're a startup company. We've been around for quite a few years. We have many large enterprise customers, and kind of our value proposition in the MFA market is that we provide passwordless, phishing resistant MFA that works with modern and existing on-prem and legacy applications as well. And that's really sort of the hole in the market today. And we'll go and explain a little bit more about that. But anyway, that's who we are, and we're very excited that Andre, that you invited us to participate with you.
Great. Yeah, then let's jump into the topic. For me, zero trust, that is really that kind of accepting the fact that we are heavily under attack, and partially an attacker will be successful to get hands on things like, for instance, a password, maybe on a device, but anyhow, based on accepting the fact, building everything as resilient as possible, that this doesn't cause a lot of damage so far. But let's proceed with the discussion. And I think you brought up here one very obvious point, right? And that's about phishing. Yeah? Before going into the details of phishing, I would briefly describe another topic, because I think today you can't talk about any trend topics, about any changes, without covering the topic of artificial intelligence. And roughly speaking, artificial intelligence is nothing new, right? It's around the IT industry for many decades. But there was a lot of evolution. First of all, artificial intelligence, everything what tries to be somehow behaving like a human being. Then the next iteration, going into the area of machine learning with a strong focus on building logic algorithms without explicitly programming them, but using statistical information to have a decision tree, for instance, in place. And then the next exciting iteration is that as part of a subset of machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, behaving a little bit like a human brain, especially with the fact that we don't explicitly know why a single decision has been made by the AI anymore. But the really exciting improvement is about generative AI, what is around now for 2-3 years in the mainstream, and with GPTs, and I would say it's a very strong impact on our business right now. And I would like to share a few examples on that on the next slide. One is about generating voice. And there are a couple of companies out there using voice synthesis with, I would say, really good results. For instance, for audiobooks, but also for translations. So including synchronization of speaking and having this the image at the same time. So it's really impressive. But the bad side is what we see on the next slide is that also attackers are leveraging that technology. For instance, to clone the voice, or so synthesizing the voice. And in that case, they were able to convince the mother that her daughter is in danger. She was very sure that she's hearing her daughter, but at the end of the day, it was just generated. Her daughter was all fine. And this is not just happening with voice, that's also happening with videos. So what we see on the next slide is that there was a kind of famous television series, The Mandalorian. Here we see Luke Skywalker showing up, played by Mark Hamill. And down on the next slide, we see how in 2020 Mark Hamill looked like. And at the same well, based on a lot of post-processing, the appearance was more like 30, 40 years ago. So very, very impressive, but a lot of post-processing required. No post-processing required was what we see on the next slide. When an attacker was able to do video deepfake voice synthesis at the same time, convincing in a live video conference the victim that there's a very important transaction ongoing, and I think the result was kind of 20 million pound fraud, and showing that even a live video conference is not proof enough anymore. Of course, this is today for very, very targeted attack with a lot of efforts on the attacker side. But on the next slide, there we have really an impact on something what will affect all of us in the very, very near future, much more than even today. And this is about spear phishing. So spear phishing is a really targeted attack on a single victim, trying to convince him to click a link, downloading software, sharing credentials. And even if you're doing a lot of training to your employees, a success rate of 60% is not unlikely if there's a professional attacker on the other side spending time to understand the context, the business context of the victim, bringing him in a situation that is very well, where he has a lot of confidence that the mail he got, the message he got, is from a real person he's in contact with. And 60%, that's extremely high, but a lot of time effort required for the spear phisher still. Recently, a study has been published explaining how the effort for the attacker can be reduced by 95% by leveraging generative AI, large language model, to collect the information, to build up a context that make a lot of sense in the current situation for the victim, and phrasing all the messages, or building all the messages required to convince the victim, and by achieving the same level of success rate as a human professional attacker. So around 60%. And that's something what really scares me. So in other words, if you today have credentials that are vulnerable to phishing, you should now listen very well in what we are talking about today.
Yeah, that's that Mark Hamill video. I needed some of that in real life, right? I'd like to see if I can shave 20 or 30 years off of me too, right? Maybe get a little hair, get more hair too.
That's what I want to get as well.
We'll take a double, please, right? Yeah, and but I get the picture you're painting, Andre, is pretty dire, right? The there's an imbalance of power that's happening here, and that's the important part of it that we have to, as an industry, recognize that what we're doing isn't working. And and if we look at regulations and sort of the foundation of what we're being told that we have to do, is that one is MFA is we're adding MFA in order to protect something that we know is inherently weak. That's something that this is proven over and over again, right? However, MFA in the general sense is increasing, dramatically in usage across the enterprises, right? However, the attacker success rates are increasing even more, right? And so they're doubling down and putting more investments inside of it because fundamentally it works. And so we've done that, and it's not, that portion of it is not working. And and then the other thing, that if you look at the CIS 18 or read any of the NIST standards or PCI DSS, the other portion that they talk about is you have to train your people, right? And so all of us, we every company, I'm sure that we all have our annual HR sponsored 2 hour security awareness and phishing pen tests happening inside the organizations, and we know that doesn't work, right? And so there's this research from KnowBe4. They publish this every year. They're a phishing teaching company, and their report is 32 million tests, 12 million users, 35,000 different companies that they've done these tests on. And after the traditional HR kind of testing, 18% of the company will click the bait. And then even if you do one solid year of extensive training, 5.4% will click the bait. So from an attacker perspective, this is great, right? I mean, one in 20 phishing emails are going to be successful from this statistical perspective. And so we've got to change, right?
Yeah, it just to make that clear, here we are talking about a generic phishing campaign, not targeting a single user, but a large user population without adjusted messaging to the singular person. Even with training, a spearfisher will not notice any negative impact for his attacks based on the trainings, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, is our practices today are largely dependent on humans, users, right? This is our blame, basically, is it's your fault as the user. And that's the fundamental perspective of what phishing resistant is about, is how do we not do that? How do we make technology be responsible rather than what we know are vulnerable, which are people?
Mm, mm,
And
mm.
that's where we move into this notion of what is this phishing resistant MFA.
Exactly, because that's something what we have to make sure, that it's not the human being we blame there. So there's a general trend that is obvious. We go away from knowledge-based authentication, and we have to do that. And there are new things around, like passkey, bringing together different factors. But let's have a look on the oversight on the next page. That's a kind of landscape explaining a little bit on how secure is the mechanism and how usable is the technology used. And what I want to highlight there is one single fact. Password is of course vulnerable to phishing. Hey, please enter your credential right here. But if you go to the next slide, unfortunately, a lot of the multi-factor authentications we have out there is still vulnerable to phishing. Because a time-based token can be requested by the attacker in the same way as a password, yeah? Or if there is no correlation of on a browser session when it comes to links sent out via email, yeah, you don't have any confidence that the user, the end user, is really confirming a particular transaction, a sign-in operation, or whatever. You just know that he clicked a link, yeah, and if there's a love, or if there's a kind of number matching thing, yeah, if the attacker is explaining the victim what he has to do, and then he's doing that, and in that case, we are still vulnerable to phishing, so we have to get rid, letting the end user make any decision. Yeah, that's a kind of message when it comes to different MFA mechanisms.
Yeah, perfect. So, but we see that map that Andre talked about of different kinds of methods and techniques for authentication. And so, but and we definitely know where that going to that higher assurance with the phishing resistance come in. But let's step back a little bit and be hit the real world. And because I think sometimes in the standards like we talked about, PCI, CS18, NIS2, any of these things, they spell out MFA as a requirement, but they don't really tell you the fact that, hey, not all MFAs are created equal or are have the same levels of assurance. And the document that best explains that is in NIST, the US NIST 863B Digital Identity Guidance, and of course the European standards also point to this as a framework. And so what they do is they try to map out risk profiles and what is it that you're trying to protect. And so the first level is this AAL1, is this low assurance level. And here they're saying, hey, you can use username and passwords. And you can use these weak MFAs like SMS, that Andre just mentioned about the one-time OTP configurations. And that says, hey, there's a low probability of damaging your reputation, low probability of financial loss, zero impact to public interest, zero data loss, zero impact to safety and criminal violations. And then they move over to this AAL2. And now we start to move into this medium kind of category here of the same type of profile. And here they're saying, hey, you need to use something better. You need to use things like mobile push, or those hardware tokens from the old days of RSA, or the software tokens that we have today. And then the third one is this AAL3, this high assurance, where things start to matter, right? Where the impacts are really detrimental to the stakeholders. And one of the interesting things that I think about when I look at this is that it says that if there is even a medium risk to safety, you must have high assurance, right? And you sort of have to, for your own business, you need to assess what is it? What is the risk of a data breach, right? And MFA is something that is protecting the initial access before they start moving lateral, right? If we can nip it in the bud, which is, what's interesting is this is actually a preventative control, right? And then we can lower the noise that detection-based systems will have to deal with. But this is how you assess your risk for that. But there's some leading it. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andre.
Don't I want to bring up one point when it comes to that
Right.
kind of safety thing, right? Because sometimes it's not very obvious what can happen if there's somewhere a break in their overall security infrastructure. One example that comes especially to my mind when it is about safety is many years ago there was a hack of a dating platform, Ashley Madison. Yeah? And the interesting thing here about is interesting, dramatic, yeah, when it comes to this kind of safety aspect, yeah. Unfortunately, for the affected person of the breaches, there's been information become public, yeah, about things like sexual orientation, these kind of things, and that resulted then in suicides that are committed because of that hack, right? So even if it was okay, it's somehow data has a negative impact on reputation, blah blah blah. No, but it really affected the life of people in a tremendous way, yeah. And if it's about things like, for instance, locating vehicles in a kind of automotive scenario, yeah, that is absolutely safety relevant. There are a lot of use cases out there, or thinking about that kind of fitness trackers, yeah, showing places where people are going to train, yeah, and then this information is used to get an understanding where a military location is, these kind of things. There are a lot of things where it is getting safety relevant. So there, you have to be careful assessing this part of that NIST regulation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That is a good point. Yeah, I think people miss that, and I think that's good that you're pointing that out, right? And so now let's look a little further out. Where is all of this going? And we're kind of modeling this not only for you of today is for preparation. What vector should be you be moving on? And so we hear about zero trust and CISA recently, or not recently, but the U.S. CISA released this zero trust maturity model, ZT MFA, and inside of it, it has these 5 pillars that we're very familiar with about zero trust. And in each of the pillar, the first pillar being identity, sort of the foundational or the cornerstone of what should be that maturity model that you're moving towards. And then it starts grading, saying that your initial, traditional, initial, advanced, and optimal. And so what do they say about this? So inside of this particular maturity model, what they're saying is that today you may be using single factor, but what you need to move to is to this first step is getting to MFA, right? And then, but where you really should be today, if you're moving your programs, is into advanced, right? And many of the critical infrastructure um, um, industries that are regulated by the whatever department inside the federal government, this is what they're telling you have to do. And so they're saying, hey, you need to have phishing resistant MFA, things like FIDO and PIV cards, that or X509 certificate based cards, is that this is for the initial access, sort of like that first login, right? But what they are saying is, in the optimal portion of it is that you need phishing resistant everywhere, right? That you and that this is largely, you think about it, is many companies don't protect their on-prem assets adequately, right? That's usually where the most important types of things are, and attackers are getting to the easier web exposed and then laterally moving, and they're just, that GUI inside is they're able to do. And so this zero trust maturity model is saying your authentication method needs to go in this direction. And then another example of that is where the Australian governments have been very aggressive on security controls, right? And so they have the Essential 8 maturity model that they updated earlier this year as well. And so inside of here, the control essential number 3 is multi-factor authentication, but they see how important this particular thing, this control is. And so level 1 is sort of where many of us are today, MFA to online services. Right? And then level 2 is saying, hey, you know what? We need to get MFA into the desktop also. We have to have better trust as you're getting the local access to the workstations. And then now we need to move phishing resistant to the online services. And then when you get to this level 3, and level 2 is where pretty much all of the Australian government agencies have to meet level 2 today. And then level 3 is similar to the CIS model, is that now you need phishing resistant anytime that you are accessing data, right? And so that says pretty much this pervasiveness of what you have to do as we move into the this zero trust maturity models. Okay? So let me pass it back to you.
Yeah, and I really like that fact. Yeah, anytime you're accessing data, because that really brings us now to the point of the zero trust assessments. And we often have the situation in zero trust assessment. Oh yeah, we are on the advanced state. We have MFA in place, and here we are on the optimal state, and so on. And typically, what the people are then explaining to you is a happy path. Yeah. So on the right device, yeah, on accessing the right application by the right protocol, and then we really have that kind of very high level of zero trust maturity. But unfortunately, in the real life, there are a lot of different ways to access data at the end of the day. And I showing here just the very first beginning of the assessment part, as we don't have time to go through all the pillars. So we're talking a little bit about the identity and the device pillar, not about network application data pillar. But first of all, is getting a good understanding what types of identities do you have and what kind of authentication assurance level are you asking for? Because it's not the case that you are asking for the super strong MFA every single time, but maybe there are situations in which you're still around with a weaker level. And that might have, having zero trust in mind, a negative effect because it's letting you somewhere deep into your IT just with AAL1, just if credential Z is vulnerable to phishing. So this is the one thing. Then different types of users would be great if you have MFA in place for all of them, passwordless, but maybe there is a user population that you can't cover for a particular reason. And okay, I don't want to go into the identity assurance thing, but talking a little bit about the device perspective, then first of all, do I have all these devices under my control? Are they managed? Are they company-owned devices and managed by the organization, or are they managed partially? Maybe you have remote locations, sites that are not under control of the central IT, but still connected to your Active Directory, for instance. And then, even if they are connected to your Active Directory, are you enforcing MFA to access that device? Are you enforcing MFA before logging into the Windows system, or are you not doing it? So there are a lot of situations where it's important to have an understanding about the possible ways through your IT and understanding where do we have phishing vulnerable credentials in place, where do we have just a knowledge-based authentication instead of a multi-factor authentication. And if you now take network, but especially application part into that game as well, then the reality is there are many situations in which applications are connected just to the Active Directory. Yeah. And when there were the desktop clients, that can be accessed just with a password. And then it is great if you're enforcing push notification mobile app for particular web applications, but maybe the very critical assets are not protected with that. And the zero trust assessment really helps to understand these kind of weaknesses in your whole landscape. And yeah, and then it is really about having bringing a solution into that kind of infrastructure that is really solving these weaknesses, but still allows you to really move forward in a timeline that makes sense for you. If the solution is, yeah, hey, you have to get rid of the Active Directory, you have to get rid of NTLM, Kerberos, and all these kind of things, and doing everything by SAML and OpenID Connect and OAuth, great. But unfortunately, that will take a decade, something like that. And you can't wait so long. You have to have the solution in place on a very short period of time. So the next slide. I'm just highlighting a few of these artifacts that are an outcome of such an assessment, helping you to understand where are we today, where do we want to, what do we want to achieve, what are kind of quick wins, so approaches where we have costs but a very high outcome, a very high benefit when it comes to security posture, and based on that, that information can be then used to really build a value-driven roadmap, explaining you exactly how to improve your zero trust landscape and move forward. That's now very abstract. Don, I'm quite sure you can provide an example for kind of quick win, yeah, to get rid of some of these weaknesses.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. That's where the intent is too. So, all right. So this section I wanted to introduce to this. If phishing resistant MFA is so great, why isn't everybody doing it? This is sort of like our mother's conversation. If they're jumping off a bridge, do you do it too? But you would think this is such an obvious problem, and to solve the standards are starting to finally catch up and see the real problem that we have with phishing and how it's impacting ransomware and data theft. So the question is, why, right? So here's the thing that I'd like to share with you. Okay, so FIDO so FIDO and passkeys, device bound and sync passkeys. This is really important technology, right? However, I want you to think about this. What does it do? FIDO is based on WebAuth. WebAuth only works with web applications that support WebAuth. So really, today, that's SaaS applications. This is SSO is what it supports. Right? Even to be able to log into a Windows machine, you have to have Windows Hello for Business active, and you have to have it Entra joined in order to be able to do that. But enterprises are so much more than just SaaS apps, right? Those are the productivity apps for the white collar workers, and we all enjoy them. The HR loves Workday and all of those kinds of things that have really modernized things. But the line of business portion of it is made up of so many other things that FIDO does not support. And even when we add technologies like Windows Hello for Business into that mix to be able to leverage the FIDO capabilities, that's even very limited, right? I mean, once again, it only works with, like, for VPN only if it's a um, a web-based type of a VPN, right? And many of us have radius-based VPNs, and it doesn't work with remote desktop for virtual desktop types of things unless you're using certificates instead of using FIDO capabilities. These are all these limits. But then all the way over to the right, what about all of those password apps that are driving the rest of your line of business, right? And the other portion that I want to point out is because of the fallback mechanisms and because of the incompatibilities, your users, even when you introduce these technologies in, they are still managing passwords, they're creating passwords, and they're using passwords. And so it's not passwordless, it's more less frequently used, or sometimes passwordless is the best that you can achieve from that perspective. So you didn't achieve your security goals, nor did you achieve your user experience goals either, right? And that's where we come in with the octopus. So at Secret Double Octopus, we provide a mechanism for being able to achieve phishing resistant authentication using that enterprise-wide for all of your use cases. We are a truly passwordless solution, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So let me show you what this is about. So what the user experience would be is, oops, I'm sorry, that's not the right one. Oh, sorry, Mac here. The user experience, like on a Mac, would be is you go to log in, excuse me, you go to log in, and you, whoops, what's going on? Yeah. So you touch the FIDO key so that you make your gesture, and you log in just like that. Right? As simple as that. But so that's the typical user experience. But if we go look at, like, VPN as an example, that's a radius-based VPN. How do we start to do this? Because that is not WebAuth. It doesn't know how to do these kinds of things. So here we're going to launch a checkpoint VPN. Here the client is being launched. It's asking for the FIDO gesture. That particular key has a biometric on it as well, and we see that the lock symbol right there at the top for checkpoint, the VPN, is active at that point. So it showed that compatibility there. Now I want to show you a little bit more complicated one. Okay, so you have existing password apps your on-prem line of business or a legacy application. And maybe I'm going to pick an even harder one. There are some applications in many enterprises that are not even directory joins. They have a database that manages a local credentials inside of it. So how do you do that? How do you modernize that? So here, let me show you this example. And I'm going to stop this as we go to explain what's going to happen. Okay. So we're going to start a legacy application here. Okay. And this application is tied to a MySQL database of users. It's not even directory joined for Active Directory or Entra or Okta or anything like that. Okay. So now what's going to happen is that we open the application, and Octopus, you as the admin will have taught Octopus, hey, these are these particular applications, and this is the where the credential library resides. And Octopus is going to manage those credential libraries, rotating, and I'll explain a little bit more about what happens there. Here, so now you've started the application, okay, and Octopus recognizes it, and it's going to just told you to go give me your FIDO, right? So you gesture onto the FIDO, and the Octopus is going to inject the tokens that's required in order for that application to be authenticated without the user having use of any passwords. Okay? So that solves a lot of these problems that enterprises have. And then if we consider like frontline workers, again, a lot of times here, what frontline workers end up with is these shared accounts, right? Where there's a username and password taped underneath the keyboard, and the shift worker comes in and they're taking their turn to be able to use this, whether this is in retail, manufacturing, healthcare, banking systems. It's a common practice that's shared accounts here. Let's try that one more time. Okay, so here we have three employees. This Austin, Fred, and Kimberly. We see that Austin isn't authorized, but Fred and Kimberly are authorized. And so there's this other thing that's called the factory floor. So this is our shared account, okay? But inside of it, we're going to turn around and add who is authorized to be able to use this particular shared account. And now we're going to show this. Normally this will be time slice, but this is going to show all of these people trying to authenticate into that particular shared account at the same time. And we're going to use badge cards, right? So these are FIDO badge cards here. And so each one has their own particular badge cards, and they're going to try to authenticate into this shared account. Right? And so here we're forcing them to use strong authentication, although we're proxying them so that they can access the shared account. And we can see on the top that Fred has just logged into the shared account. Same for Kimberly, right? That you can see he's actually on the shared account. And then that Austin failed. But now we have a log that shows exactly who did what, even though we didn't have to redesign that whole shared account, right? And there's a reason that the shared accounts exist, because sometimes they help with productivity, they save money, and how you manage the users. They're not typically part of the Uber, Okta, or Entra existence. So once again, this is the idea: is how do we get you to strong authentication using phishing resistant method enterprise wide for everything inside the enterprise. Okay?
And
So
to highlight that aspect, that's a super important one from my point of view. If there are particular situations in which the user can use a FIDO token to log in, which is more convenient and more secure, but still a couple of other situations in which they have to use a password. Yeah, for instance, oh yeah, now we are opening remote connections, then I have to use a password because FIDO isn't working there, blah blah blah. If there are these kind of situations, then an attacker can still convince the users to share their password with them. And then it doesn't help that they're using FIDO in 60% of the situations. If they are 40% in which they don't use it, still remembering, still sharing the attacker, and the attacker can bypass the FIDO easily because the password is still good enough. Yeah, so there's a kind of not really a security improvement, even if you enroll the users with MFA.
yeah, absolutely, and we'll have to kind of look at the sort of the definition, Okay, and so Alejandro Lear from Coopinger Cole, he has a pretty good definition. He says passwordless authentication solution should provide a consistent login experience across all devices, introduce a frictionless user experiences, including integrated authentication approach, and ensure that no password or password hashes are traveling over the network anymore. Great. That's a lot of words. So, question, how do you know if you're passwordless? Okay, and so I think it's a simple one. Okay, and unfortunately, I don't have it from somebody else as my quote here. Do your users know or use their directory passwords? That's the simple question. And until the answer to that is no, they don't know it and they don't use it, you're not passwordless. Okay, and just what Andre said is that's what we're trying to achieve, right? Is eliminate the threat and improve the user experience. And so what I want to point out is that SSO is great, right? Single sign-on. It's we got our checkerboard menu of things that we typically use. These are usually passwordless only if you're using FIDO. But what they are, this less frequently used passwords, right? And then I mentioned with Windows Hello for Business, it's sometimes passwordless because it does it for Windows and it does for things that are intra SSO, but not for anything else. And that's exactly the same case for Okta. Okta FastPass is for Okta SSO, right? But all those other things that are inside the infrastructure are just not reachable. And enterprises are complex environments. They have many more applications than that. We pointed out FIDO, and for Octopus, this is where we really shine from that perspective. Okay, is that we are truly, oops, sorry, passwordless. I just lost my file. Okay. And so what happens, how this works inside the Octopus is we manage the directory password entries, but we replace what the password that the user originally created. We replace it with a machine generated token that we're constantly rotating. Okay, so users, once they've joined into the Octopus platform, users never create, remember, or expose another password. Okay, and but the main thing that's the most important portion of it is it's compatible with the applications and with your existing directories, right? So that we're trying to achieve passwordless without having you to completely redesign your infrastructure in order to be able to achieve it. Now, once you've eliminated threat and you want to modernize the infrastructure towards a completely SAML or an SSO configuration, or to FIDO, that's great because we want you to do that and our system works with that. So we give you a flexibility of the authenticators with our platform that can be deployed as a service, as a SaaS or on-prem, and then showing you that we are able to eliminate the password login into all of these systems. Okay, and so now one of the things that I'd like to talk about is that I think every IT leader gets passwordless. They look over to the left, and they see their users and they say, heck yeah, let's get rid of those passwords. It's going to make their user experience better. They're always exposing passwords. We're failing our pen tests, our phishing pen tests. We absolutely get that. Then they look over at the right side at the infrastructure and they say, oh my goodness, there are so many, the applications, the infrastructure, the number of passwords that are inside of here are daunting. And that's where the real expense comes in, is redesigning applications and directory infrastructure to be able to match up with FIDO, to be able to match up with X509, and to even be able to match up with SSO, right? Because any application that you have has to be compatible with the SSO configuration that you have, which means that's be recoded or reconfigured. And so that's the point that we want to sort of emphasize of what we showed you from a demo perspective wise is that Octopus is compatible with your existing applications and directories, and it's going to deliver a passwordless MFA experience to all of your users. Okay. All right. So, Andre, we had like a couple. I guess we're at the end of that particular of the presentation. So, I guess I'll go first as far as sort of of a closing thought for myself. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So key takeaways. Number one, right? The first key takeaway that I want to make sure, this is sort of an obvious and nothing profound here, but think about this. Passwordless is one of the rare instances where adding a security control improves user experience, right? The security is always telling people, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, right? This is one of the few things that IT can deliver into the organization that builds on security, makes the experience better, and to a certain degree lowers operating costs as well. Okay, and then over to you, Andre.
Yeah, and my recommendation is be flexible. We have a threat landscape that is changing absolutely fast, and so it is you cannot spend 2 years on building something and hope that it's still fitting very well. You have to have solutions that improve the security posture right now, without changing your whole IT infrastructure. You should change it over time anyway, yeah, moving it into the modern cloud, internet-facing world, but you can't do that right away, and you need a solution that is really allowing you to act flexible to that kind of changing threat landscape. And having said that, getting rid of the password is a very, very good step in this zero trust journey, because having a phishing vulnerable credential out there is challenging today and will be the number one entry point for the attackers into your IT infrastructure.
Excellent. So, should we pass it back to Manuela? Are there any questions that
Yeah,
we should ask here?
questions. So we have like 10 minutes left. So I encourage you to ask your questions to Andre and Don. We have a few first questions, so let's jump into them. The first one is, does MDL for authentication purposes meet the same security level as the solution as you walked us through?
Well, so first of all, I have to guess what MDL in that context stands for. I think it might be mobile driver licenses, as is a topic that is right now heavily discussed in the industry, having a real world example for verifiable credentials. In general, it's so what we have as part of the mobile driver license is a holder binding, yeah, so the device binding in place. So and based on that, it's multi-factor authentication. If you show it, the challenge is that the use cases where you can use it are somehow limited. Yeah. So in other words, signing into your database that is leveraging Kerberos with your Active Directory with your mobile driver license will likely not work. Yeah. So, but when it comes to the level of authentication assurance, it's of course a stronger approach. But there's one difference I see when it comes to the steps of where you're going to show the kind of credential, even if it's not vulnerable to phishing. You're not having situations like with everything that is built on top of FIDO2 that that you have that domain where you show the credentials as part of this enrollment process, or in other words, the end user is not able to select whether to show it or not because there's just one identity provider where the credential is bound to. So there's a difference from security perspective, of course.
All right. The next question is, what's the difference with OAuth 2.0 leveraging PCKE?
Well, Pixie, how it is called, that's a kind of extension of the OAuth 2.0 protocol, helping against one very targeted attack in which the that kind of scheme of a native app is overwritten by an attacker. So you have an evil app and a good app on your phone, and that prevents that the good app is starting the authentication process, the end user is giving consent, is logging in, and then the evil app is getting the token. So that's something where if Pixie comes into play. So I would say it's kind of little bit different dimension of attacks it's used for.
Thank you. Next one is, we use Windows Hello. Can we use SDO to cover some applications not supported by Windows Hello? And how would we do this best?
Okay, so yeah, then that's a common problem that companies have. I think to a certain degree, almost every company evaluates. They first get into. I don't know if this is true for you, Andre, in your experience. That this is where they start. Is they start. Oh, Windows Hello for Business, it's free. Let's go do that one, right? And then they start looking into it and they say, oh gosh, look at all these things that it doesn't work with, and look how much work I have to do to get it to work even for the limited things that it has. And that's not a terrible thing, right? But it's Microsoft, and that's just how Microsoft things work. So um, what we tend to do is we work. There's really two parts to this with Windows Hello for Business. What's the most important part is intra, right? That's the most important portion of it that you're building, is an infrastructure is compatible with intra. And Windows Hello for Business is one portion of it. And just like for Okta, it would be FastPass, would be sort of the equivalent to it, right? Is that it's universal directory and all of the things that are compatible with it. And so Octopus works with Entra. Octopus works with Okta, right? So WFS, Fed and stuff like that. It works with that. And so what we end up doing is you can add us as another method in next to Windows Hello for Business. Okay. However, probably what makes a lot more sense is to make us the authentication layer for Entra. Okay, and by the way, if you want to use like a Microsoft Authenticator, the mobile app, or Okta's Verify, that's fine. Okay, because we become the IDP of their IDP, right? So that you can get all of this benefit of that use case portion of coverage by that integration strategy.
All right, so looking to the clock, let's give it one more question. Octopus adds another layer to my authentication infrastructure. How about dependencies with respect to security and availability?
I think I should answer that question, huh, Andre?
Yeah, well, please
We can talk
start,
about
Don, and then I will share my thoughts
yeah.
about it.
Yeah. So let's see. Let me think here. I'm trying to understand the second part of it. The dependency on security is Octopus adds another layer to my authentication infrastructure. There is an Okay, so fundamentally, what Octopus is an MFA. Okay, and we're going to slide into pretty much anybody's identity infrastructure, meaning directories and those things that are managed in people. And we have that whole infrastructure of all the logging and for visibility. I showed the example of kind of filling those visibility, like shared accounts. Good example of where the visibility is terrible, right? Because you can't tell who did what. And a lot of times what's interesting is those shared accounts, that's at the core of your business. Like if you're in manufacturing or in healthcare, these are the nurses logging into the various medical equipment and stuff like that. You still can't tell who did what. And so we're at building on top of that. I don't think I answered that question very well. So Andre, I'll let you take a shot at it, please.
Yeah, well, so but when it comes to dependency, from my point of view, the Active Directory password goes away, is replaced by a generated long token instead of it. Yeah? So from a dependency perspective, is it affecting it, is changing it? Well, it depends on your perspective on it. Security point of view, there's of course this kind of authentication method supported by Secret Double Octopus on the one side. On the other side, the Active Directory password, the vulnerable short phishing, vulnerable to phishing password is gone away, right? So that's a kind of thing. When it comes to to availability, I think that's kind of question that comes into that as well. Of course, on top of the availability of Active Directory, there's a availability requirement of SDO. Maybe Don, you want to share a little bit of your perspective on that, how you make sure that the overall vulnerability is not decreased.
The vulnerability, I guess the major vulnerability that we're trying to decrease is that darn password, right?
Sorry, I meant the availability. So that we need to have the Active Directory, but we of course have also the SDO.
Yes, actually, that's sort of an interesting. There's a use case that we wrote in our newsletter about the sort of availability where we were trying to add to it from an MFA perspective wise. And what we have is these hot swapping capabilities from cloud to on-prem, right? And so example with like trains and cruise and shipping, they're in and they're out, right? And so, but the services still have to go, right? And so even and that's one of the things that's sort of interesting about our product is the fact that we still support on-prem very heavily, right? And so, you know, I like even we recently have a customer ADFS, right? They've built this ADFS infrastructure for their SSO, and now they're saying how the heck do I make that passwordless, right? Right? Oh, I got to redesign the whole ADFS infrastructure. It's like, as you say, Andre, decades, right? Not
Absolutely.
months,
Absolutely.
decades. If you take a shot at that, so hopefully I answered that question.
Right.
Okay, we have one more question. I don't know, it's for Don. Maybe you can do a quick answer. Could you share some of the new features that SDO is currently developing, and also who do you consider your main competitors in the market today?
You know, I'll give you a preview of what I think is the most important one, SSO. We are developing an SSO for everything, right? Not just web apps, but everything, where you authenticate and then you don't authenticate for whatever time period, right? And that, I think, for enterprises with very, very complex infrastructure, they'll say, well, that sounds sort of magical. That doesn't seem possible. But that's sort of the next big thing that we're going to be releasing, the passwordless SSO for everything.
Okay, great. Thanks, for the answers, and thanks to the two of you for giving us such a great presentation. I want to thank everybody that joined today's webinar. You will receive the recording and the slides in a few days. And yeah, I wish you all a great rest of the day, and goodbye to everybody. See you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Goodbye.